if everything works okay. Just quickly checking the last bits and pieces. There we go. I'm live. Wonderful. It's always a little bit of a figuring out if everything works to the situation, but it does, which is wonderful. We are going to have a really fun and relaxed sketchbook session today. Thank you so much for joining in. I'm really looking forward to drawing with you today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Irene and I am an illustrator and art teacher from the Netherlands, and I live in the UK. And I'm a sketchbook artist. I do lots of sketchbooking live here on YouTube. But I also illustrate for a lot of green and environmental businesses. So that's also something that I do a lot. So a bit of a mix of both. And today we are going to draw a portrait. And you can see the reference photo up here on the screen. And let me quickly share the link to it as well. There we go. I'll share it in the chat. So there we go. It is a photo from Unsplash, which is an open source stock photo website where you're allowed to use the photos for all sorts of different purposes. And yeah, I just picked this photo because I liked it for no other reason than that. If you're joining in today, you can use any materials that you like. Feel free to draw along with me or draw something of your own making is absolutely fine. I'm going to talk you through my process and through my techniques for drawing a portrait. And I'm going to use this Strathmore mixed media sketchbook. You can see I have already prepared a little bit of a sketch, and I'm going to sketch a little bit more with you. So I'm going to use this sketchbook. I also have some color pencils here that I will use. And it's a mix of Derwent pencils and Faber-Castell pencils. And I also have a Dahlia Rowney paint set here, which I will use to add some color to my paper. I don't know if I will need to dry my paper in between. Watercolor painting live is sometimes a little bit tricky. So I have a hairdryer here in case I want to quickly dry a layer. But I don't think I will be using too much water today. So, and my camera should come back again in a sec. Sometimes it turns off for a second. There we go. So let's get started. I also have a cup of tea, very important. So, there we go. So we will be drawing a portrait. And let me zoom in a little bit more. So you can see I have already prepared a little bit of a sketch. And I will talk you through the process in a moment. So it's a little bit of a messy sketch. And we are going to work from there. So if you want to download the photo, you can do so. Take your time for your sketch. I know that this is quite a short session, a little bit short for a whole portrait, which is why I did a bit of preparation. So if you want to download the photo and take your time for your sketch, absolutely do so. And just feel inspired by what I'm doing, hopefully, further on. So there we go. So whenever I draw a portrait, I'm starting with the really large shapes, and I like to work from large to small, and that counts for any, like for portraits, but for any subject that I'm drawing. I always work from the larger areas and slowly go into more and more detail. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'm very happy to answer questions. So if anything comes up, just ask away and I'll see if I can help. When I draw a portrait, I'm working from large to small. So I'm working with the really large shapes, focusing on first the shape of the head. Is sort of a longer face or a rounder face. I know there's lots of different techniques for setting up a sketch, but I tend to start with the sort of rough shape of the outline of the face and just decide how large that is going to be on my paper. So as you can see, I sort of cover this with my hand. My paper is maybe A5, sort of roughly shaped. And so I'm not working too large today. And I'm going to sketch this out a little bit more. So I'm using my color pencils and I'm slowly blocking out the darker areas. So I've already set up a bit of a sketch. It's a bit of a messy sketch. This is going to be a bit of a stylized portrait, not photorealistic. But I'm doing a little bit of an underlayer base in color pencils and then going over it with watercolors. So I'm just blocking out all the darker areas of the sketch. So here we go. And the hair is quite dark. There's quite a lot of darker areas sort of around the face. I picked this reference photo partially because the lighting is really good. If you are new to drawing portraits, try and start with photos where there's really clear lights and darks, because it makes your life much easier than when you have to when things are a bit blurry or out of focus, when you cannot really see where the lights and the darks are, when everything is really evenly lit. So something with a really clear spotlight is much easier to set up, and it's easier to see the shapes in your drawing as well. So I'm going over that whole area. Here there's some dark areas here on the neck. So, as I said, this is going to be a little bit of a sort of illustrated, stylized portrait, not too realistic because of the time that we have today. So a little bit of shadows here around the nose. Hopefully you can see my sketch a little bit better once I make this a little bit darker as well. I know that in the beginning everything is always quite light and a bit hard for my camera to pick up, but I'll slowly make it darker and it'll be a bit easier to see. I host these live sessions on YouTube every week, almost every week. I've been away a few times, but almost every week, and I am around quite a lot going forward. I've had a lot of travel planned, but that is going to calm down a little bit now after the summer. So that means that I have time for more regular sessions again. So there we go. So you can see I'm just blocking out the darker parts of the face, the shadow areas. So there's a little bit of shadow here around the eye. So you can see I'm holding my pencil really flat, no details yet. Just focusing on those rough shapes. So there we go. Hi Sheila, really lovely to see you. That's absolutely fine. I'm really glad that you found me and that you accidentally came past. I'm really happy to have you here. You're always welcome, whether it is all scheduled out or a little bit by accident. So I'm just taking my time, color blocking this out. I'm going to work a little bit in sort of monochrome colors today, or like within sort of reddish purple color scheme, instead of doing like realistic skin colors. So I'm going to play a little bit with that. That's what a sketchbook is for me. It's very much about play and having fun and learning. So I'll make that top a bit darker as well. I sort of feel like I left a little bit too much space at the top of the page. Maybe I can fill that out a little bit with something, but for now, there we go. I could do an entire color pencil portrait, but I sort of decided I fancied a bit of painting earlier, so let's stick to the plan. So just adding in a little bit of the shape of the pupils and then the irises, and then going to start in paint. So there we go. This is my base for today. And I'm going to use some watercolors to just slowly build up the layers, have a little bit of fun, and add some color to my paper. So you can see I'm clipping my paper. The sketchbook never stays open very well, so I'm putting a clip on each side to keep it open. So that is a bit of a first trick, so make sure you can see it. And I have a pot of water here. Sometimes I use two to clean my brush and one to paint with, but today I'm only having one, and I have my colors here as well. So there we go. And I have a size 10 brush here, so I'm working with a fairly large brush, not going in too much detail quite yet. I'm just wetting my palette a little bit. I have a spray bottle here that I like to use to add a bit of water to my palette. See, there we go. You can see this side has been used a bit more than that side. And I also have some tissue papers here to wipe my brush on if I need to. So the paper that I'm using is mixed media. I can just quickly show you before we go in. I use it for mixed media. So today I'm going to use watercolors. I use usually a mix of watercolors and crayons and color pencils in here. Sometimes ink. And the paper holds on quite well. So it seems to deal quite well with various wet mediums. But I'm not going to use lots of water, only a little bit sparsely. So, just quickly making sure everything is you could possibly make the upper head a bit higher to use. Yeah, I think I'll add something to the background, a bit of color. I think I'm going to leave my sketch like this. But yeah, I agree. I didn't quite use my entire paper, but it's okay. It is okay. So there we go. So let's decide what colors I'm going to use. I already wanted to do a bit of a warm color scheme, sort of the colors of the top that she's wearing in the photo. So I was thinking a bit of like warm reds, purples, a bit of yellow. Just keeping it quite warm. So let me start mixing up a bit of paint. So, and I'm starting with the first layer, really watered down colors. I'm going to work from light till dark. And the first thing I'm going to do is just start adding a little bit of color to those shadow areas. So, see, I'm just going over that color pencil. This is normal color pencil, not water soluble. I do have some watercolor pencils as well, but for today I just use my normal pencils. So I'm just really quite gently starting to add in some of those darker tones. So you can see that I'm not using any black. I might do later. I'm not using any black right now. I'm just adding in those shadow areas. So really take your time. So I know I always work fairly fast, but I don't expect you to work at the same rate. If you need a little bit more time, that's absolutely fine. And also remember that this is going to be available to watch back later on. If you are painting along and you want to go back a little bit and check what it was that I did, you can always watch the recordings later. So, and the light in this picture is quite clearly coming from the left hand side. So we can see that the shadows are most prominent here on the right side of the photo. Not necessarily the right side of her face, but the right side of the photo. The nose, the cheeks here, the hair, everything on the right side is quite dark. Actually, I might just carry this on a little bit to the background as well. So instantly adding a little bit of color to that background. And the paint that I'm using is a bit granulated, so I quite like that granulated effect, but it is, you can see a little bit of texture there as well. So, and I'm working wet on dry, so my paper is dry and the paint is wet. But of course, the next layer the paint is going to be a little bit wet. So I either need to be patient and let it dry a little bit, or do the use a hairdryer to dry it. So I quite like using a fairly large brush for painting. So you can also see that the paint is slightly lighter than the color pencil underneath. So there's already a bit of a dual sort of effect, where some areas are a little bit darker and other areas are a little bit lighter. So really gently adding in those strokes. And as I said, I like to use a fairly large brush. And one of the reasons I like to do that is because that allows me to let go of that perfectionism a little bit. Let go of the really small strokes and diving into too much detail too soon. I think detail is wonderful and it's really fun to dive into the detail, but if you do it too early, it can sort of ruin the flow of your process a little bit. So don't go into the detail too quick. Start with the larger shapes and work from there. So there we go. I'm quite enjoying this already. So I start to feel like I'm warming up a bit. The beginning of a picture is always a bit of warming up there. So I'm just really focusing on the shadow shapes. So I'll zoom in a little bit more so you can see it. So there we go. So I might make that a little bit darker. Maybe if I add a teeny tiny bit of blue, just a tiny drip, really careful, so I can change the tone a tiny bit. So and I can use that to add a slightly darker shadow here on the outside. I need to be a little bit careful because one, my paper is a bit wobbly, and two, those layers that are still wet will very easily blur out sort of together and mix up. And that's okay if that's what you want, but if it also means you lose control a little bit. So be careful with the wet paint. So I've been doing a little bit more watercolor painting again recently. I always go through stages where I either paint a lot or I do a lot of color pencil drawings. I'm going to start my autumn color pencil course again shortly, so that means that that's going to be my medium for a little while. So I'm just slowly building up the layers of shadow. No details yet, just those rough, sort of looser shapes. So that earring, I might give that actually a bit of yellow color in a little bit. And talking about yellow, I'm going to add a bit of a warm tone yellow to the picture, and I think I'm going to use a bit of a yellow ochre. So let's mix that up. Maybe I can add a little bit of the lemon yellow to it to make it a tiny bit brighter. So there we go. Taking off, I always take off most of my paint. So there we go. I always take off most of the paint from my brush before I apply it to the paper, because sometimes the colors can be a bit intense. Let me see. How do you get into other watercolor classes when we get into? So I'm not really sure if I understand the questions. I do watercolor classes as courses. So for example, I'm doing a landscape painting course in watercolors and an abstract painting course in watercolors. And I host community sessions. So I have a community where people are members of, and we paint there every other week, paint or draw, and we create art together. So that's another option. And otherwise it's all here on YouTube. So all my free sort of content and classes are all here on YouTube. So most of my events are all in my community, if that's what you mean. So adding in a little bit of yellow here. I'm just going over the edges. You can see I let the colors blur out a little bit, mix up. So it's okay if they mix up a little bit. I'm using a little bit too much water here, so I always have some cloth available to dry things off if I need to. Yeah, so I sort of spread my time between my community and YouTube. So there we go. I really like YouTube. I find it a lot of fun to do. I was a bit tired of social media for a little while. I think if you're an artist, you sort of constantly have to create things for social media. It can be a bit overwhelming to sort of constantly have to do that. You feel more like a content creator than sort of the artist that you want to be. But YouTube I find really fun because you can create something and you can give people actual value and people can still watch it, you know, next year or next week. So it's all a little bit slower paced than for example, Instagram or something. So it's something that I enjoy and that I use, with joy. So that's why I am on YouTube a bit more recently. So I think I might need to do a drying session. Everything is very wet. You can see my paper is holding on quite well. It buckles a little bit, but not too bad. For watercolor painting, the paper that you use is extremely important, much more important than for color pencil drawing. I'm sure that there's artists who would really disagree with me. So I think it, especially for watercolor painting, the paper is very important. And this is not the best paper because it's mixed media, not watercolor, but it still holds on quite well. I'm going to try this for a moment. So let me grab my hair dryer. I have this small hair dryer that I use specifically to dry. I never really use it for my hair. I always use it for my painting. So I'm going to mute myself for a second. I hope that works on YouTube as well. So I'm going to mute myself, dry everything really quickly with the hair dryer, and then come back for the next layer. Let me see. I can do that. I think I just have to turn my microphone away. I don't know if I can mute myself. Well, actually, so I think that worked. I sort of clicked away the microphone, so hopefully that didn't make too much noise. It's a bit hard to check if I was actually on mute on YouTube as well, but I think I was. So you can see I've quickly dried it. It wasn't too much work to dry it because I did not use too much paint. And I'm now I have these rough shapes in place, and I'm slowly going to add a little bit more detail. So I already noticed that, for example, this eye is a little bit in the wrong place. The proportions are not perfect, and I'm slowly going to start adding a little bit more detail. So I'm going back to my color pencils for a moment. And I want to stick with these warm colors because it gives me a lot of joy. So I think some brown would work, that mixes really nice with this color. I have this warm reddish tone here. I think it's called magenta. And maybe some purples. Just having a look. This is not, I have a larger box of color pencils as well, but these are the ones that I use most often. So these are the colors that I have double and that I use most regularly. Some red. Let me get some yellow as well. There we go. I think this will work for now. I think I'll have this one ready as well. There we go. And whenever you work in color pencils, make sure, this is very important, that you have a really sharp tip on your pencil. So I know this is a little bit boring, watching me sharpen my pencils, but I always really recommend taking your time for that. So especially if you want to draw more details. My case keep breaking. That's not supposed to happen. Especially if you work on the details, you want to have a nice sharp point on your pencil. So I know some artists sharpen their pencils with a knife, and you can absolutely do that. Just be careful for your fingers. I'm a little bit lazy to do so. I'm just quite like a sharpener. So I'm seeing that someone says they have to go. That is absolutely fine. If you want to watch it back later, then you're always welcome to come back. There's a little piece of pencil stuck in here. See, this is the thing when you use a sharpener. There we go, that's better. So, you can see these are my favorite colors. They are getting quite short. Last few. I have a few pencil sharpeners because these Derwent ones are a little bit chunkier than the other ones and they don't fit so well in the other sharpener. So it's okay, they don't need to be super sharp. The light colors are okay as they are. It's mostly the detailed pencils that I want a bit sharper. So there we go. This will do for now. Move my cup of tea. There we go. Let's carry on. Let's carry on with the drawing. So I want to start adding a little bit more detail into the drawing and also just make it a little bit more precise. So you can see how I worked from the large shapes to the smaller shapes. And I'm going to start with brown, just because I think that brown works quite well with these warm tones that I've used. And first I'm just going to check if the eyes are at the right place. So I think this one is a little bit too high. See if I can tinker with that a little bit. I'm looking at the shape of that eye as well. So, see? There's always tinkering that you can do. I do this quite a lot in my charcoal classes as well. You really keep moving things. Sometimes we feel like a drawing is sort of set in its ways and you cannot make any changes. But it's not true. You can make as many changes as you want. The sketchbook that I'm using is a Strathmore mixed media. And this is the first time I bought this. I've always used different sketchbook. I like to try different ones, so I don't tend to buy the same one twice. I'm quite happy with it. I think the paper feel is nice. I'm quite happy with it. I would, if you like to work in mixed media, I think the size is quite good. And I think I would recommend it. It's not the cheapest. I think and I don't mean to be. I think they sort of price themselves being sort of high quality. I have a Sea White of Brighton sketchbook that I really like. That has many more pages than this one, which I think I prefer. But the downside of that is that it's quite thick. So if you use it for traveling or you go on holiday or something, then it's a little bit too heavy to carry around. So I'm just slowly seeing if I can work out the placement of the eye a little bit better. Really lovely to see all of you. So I quite like a mix of watercolors and coloring pencils. I'm changing the shape of the cheek here a little bit. So I tend to go over the paper sort of quite loosely, not necessarily, oh, one area is finished and then I carry on to the next. And sometimes I see artists who do that and I always admire it. But I tend to sort of go around, change things a little bit here and there. I love tinkering. This is the thing that I do a lot. Allow myself to explore and to learn. I'm sort of learning in the process of drawing. I'm still discovering lots of things. I do really like that texture as well. The mix of watercolor and pencil texture. I think that is really lovely. So her chin is a little bit more squared off, so I'm going to change that a bit. So, it looks a bit like her neck is here, but that's not necessarily true. That is just in the shadows. So I need to change that a little bit as well. Does anyone else do that quickly? Oh, Linda's asking the same thing. What sketchbook am I using? It's a Strathmore mixed media. I think I kept the label here somewhere. Did I put it in? Yeah, a Strathmore mixed media sketchbook. You write it like that with TH. And this is from the 500 series, but I don't really know Strathmore that well. This is the first time I've used this sketchbook. So I need to start adding in a little bit more texture in the hair. So I'm slowly and steadily adding in more detail. I'm sort of tempted to add another layer of paint over this, but I have not quite decided that yet. So, a bit more of a wavy feel of the hair here. I feel like I might need to use my eraser at some point. I usually try to avoid erasing until I really need it, because often I can make amendments just by sort of tinkering instead of using the eraser. So I've often found that once you start using your eraser, you sort of get a little bit caught up in perfectionism, and then sometimes that doesn't really work in a positive. Like, it's hard to explain, because I think an eraser is a great tool, but sometimes when you get used to like being able to erase things and move things around, it's hard to stop. Let's put it that way. I don't know if anyone else knows this feeling. Once you start with your eraser, like, oh, actually I need to make changes here, I need to make changes there. This is not perfect, that's not perfect. And before you know it, you can sort of get caught up in that a little bit. So you're changing the shadows around the mouth a little bit. Sometimes adding a little shadow or moving a shadow can be enough to really change the tone or the shape of something. You see how it slowly is getting shape. So, there we go. Don't forget to breathe. It's supposed to be relaxing, not stressful. So that's how I like my drawings to be, relaxed and calm. And I'm so lucky that I can spend, this is in the middle of the day here, that I can spend my day making art, and I'm so grateful for that. And that's something that I want to show through my drawings as well, that it's something that I truly love and not, want to enjoy it. Does anyone have any other questions for me? Fire away. I am doing this full time since sort of the beginning of 2019. So before the pandemic, I quit my job and became a full-time artist. This is the eraser that I love to use. So it's a Tombow, from the brand Tombow Mono eraser, and I use it for all my classes. I think it works really well with color pencil, because it's very fine. You can see the tip is very fine. It works fantastic with charcoal. They cost about £5, these little erasers, but I would really highly recommend it to buy. I mean, you can refill them as well, and they are really great with all sorts of mediums, including color pencil. And if another type of eraser that I would recommend is an kneading eraser. You can see mine is a little bit grubby because I've used it with charcoal. You can knead it through and then it's clean again, and the benefit of that is that it doesn't leave any of that eraser dust on your paper. So this one, let me see if I can show you somewhere. So if I use that mono eraser, so you can sort of create really clear highlights again. You need to sometimes put quite a lot of pressure on the paper, but they work really great. Just quickly checking that. So I am in the middle of my screen. I need to work on this eye a little bit more, so let's do that. So I'm really trying to focus on that shape. Are there any shadows in there? So I'm trying not to block the drawing with my hands. The pencils get shorter, it's a bit harder to show you. This side of the paper definitely needs to be a bit darker. You might have noticed that I've not used any black yet, and also not used any brown. I've I've used brown, which is skin tone, but the color is all purples and yellows and a little bit of brown. So I love mixing up a bit of fantasy color for a drawing. So, when are you holding another class with chalk? So I have no idea what you mean by that. With charcoal, is that what you mean? Charcoal? I'm currently doing a charcoal portrait drawing course, and after that I need to decide what I'm going to do. I also want to incorporate charcoal more in my community, but I found that a lot of people want to do watercolors at the moment, so that's sort of what I focused on. Yeah, so I'm not quite sure yet. So I know that that's not what you were hoping for, but I don't quite know what I'm doing quite yet. So I do think charcoal is a really great medium, especially for people new to art. I think I might add another layer of watercolor to this. Not sure if I'm quite happy with the tone. What should we do? Should I add a little bit of color to the eyes first? Maybe a little bit of blue. So, just for fun. There we go. Love a bit of fantasy colors. I did a portrait class a little while ago, all about color pencil portraits and how you can mix different skin tone colors without any actual skin tone colors, without any browns or pinks, but only with rainbow colors. And it's a lot of fun. I think sometimes freeing yourself up to try something a little bit different can be really liberating. Actually, setting restrictions for yourself in art can be really liberating. Sometimes by setting a restriction, you can actually free up a lot of creativity. I think I might add a little bit more paint. There we go, let's do it. What's life without risk, right? So let's do it. So, I'm drinking lemon and ginger tea, which I love, but I left the back in and it's getting really strong. Sometimes that flavour is just a bit overpowering, isn't it? Okay, let's add a bit more color. So I'm still using my large brush. I might go for a slightly smaller brush in a moment, but I just want a bit more contrast in the artwork. Contrast is really important for realism and for for the shapes as well. So I'm so glad you like it. That is really lovely to hear. So I'm going to use a bit more color this time, maybe a bit more purple. So I add some blue in. There we go. Is that too dark? Maybe a little bit more red. So there we go. So a bit more paint, more pigments and less water this time. So you can see that color is much more intense than the color it was the first layer. So there we go. It's also worth noting, this is something that I always sort of tell my students, because people quite easily forget, that doing a painting like this, where you take maybe an hour, I don't know how long we've been painting now, but where you take sort of an hour and you paint a portrait in your sketchbook, that's practice time. And it's okay to make a mistake and to use that time to practice. If I do a portrait for a commission, I'd spend so much longer perfecting the sketch. I'd spend, I don't know, sometimes it take days. Sometimes like portrait artists can take such a long time to perfect their artworks. So it's quite easy to forget that sometimes and to think, I have an hour to make a painting, it needs to be perfect. If it's not perfect, then it's ruined my time. It wasn't worth spending my time on that. But that's not true. This is practice time. This is your time to learn and to grow and to become more familiar with the medium, to practice your creativity. At least that's what I think. I think if everything has to be perfect, then it's much harder to have joy in what you're doing. So you can see I'm making these shadows a bit darker. And this brush that I'm using is quite large, but it does have quite a fine tip. I find this area here around the nose a bit too dark. I don't want it to look like she's got a nosebleed, so let's lift that up a little bit. So I need to concentrate for a moment. So I'll blend that out. So, see, it doesn't dry so fast. Still time to tinker. There we go. Let's add a bit of that color on this side as well. So even though this side is less dark in the photo, let's add a few streaks. So there we go. And I'm going to switch to a really small brush. Just quickly checking. The red is quite intense, isn't it? Maybe a little bit too intense, but let's see, I can always add a different color over it. I am going to use a really small brush, and with that paint I'm going to add a bit of shadow to the lips. So where the lips are touching each other, they are quite dark. There's a lot of shadow there. So the corners of the mouth are a bit more dark, and here so I'm trying to do this carefully, so just need to concentrate for a moment. So, there we go. I feel like it's coming together quite nicely. When you first start your drawing, sometimes it's hard to visualize what it's going to look like. So, and that's okay. It doesn't all have to be clear from the start. It's a journey. So. slowly and steadily it is coming together. Is any of you painting along? I'm just really curious. If you are, I'd love to know. The thing with watercolours is that it is a little bit of a sort of unpredictable medium in comparison to colour pencils. Colour pencils are very precise, like every line is really sort of there, like, yeah, it doesn't blur out, it's really sort of quite sort of soft. That was a bit too much. But watercolours, anything sort of can happen. It has a bit of a mind of its own, and that's like, the more you paint, of course, the more you know what to expect and what different effects are going to be like. But it's still a bit unpredictable. So I think this part needs to be a little bit higher. So. Sort of a bit in two minds if I should add a bit of a different tone. So maybe a bit of brown. There we go. Also, there's always a stage in your drawings when you feel like, oh, this is not going to work out. I've ruined it. So I'm laughing, but I know that everyone has these feelings where you look at your drawing and you're like, what did I start? Why does it not look the way I want it to look? It happens. It happens to all of us. It's okay. So a little bit of a warmer tone there. And also your art is yours. You can make any changes to it that you want. If you want to give her purple hair, you can do so. There's no rule saying you cannot. If you want to, I don't know, like change the proportions, add things, well, you can do so, absolutely. Sometimes people forget that their artwork, that art is art for a reason. It's not a photo. It's okay to change things up a little bit if you want to. I am in Cambridgeshire, so a little outside of London, and I'm in the next county on Cambridgeshire. And sometimes I go to Cambridge to work as well, and sometimes I go into London. I run a lot of like events there and stuff. So I'm sort of in the middle between the two. It's a bit too wet. See, that happens sometimes, things blur out. I think I might make the background a bit darker. So let's add some black. So I am originally from the Netherlands, where I studied law. I did not have a degree in art. I studied law and I worked in a really corporate place for years until 2019 when I quit my job. And I decided I wanted to become an artist. And I was already doing a bit of art before that, to be honest. But that's sort of the moment that I decided to really make that leap. And I left my job and I started making some musings, and that's what I'm still doing. So yeah, it was scary, especially in the beginning. I wasn't quite sure how it would go and if I could make a living from that, and where life would take me. So slowly and steadily things sort of took place, and then during the pandemic I was running all my courses online. And why am I buzzing? I was starting to run all my art classes and courses online, and slowly, I started to create this community of people who painted with me and did art classes, and it's just like the fact that I could do things online, that was just mind-blowing to me. I hadn't really thought about that until I sort of had to. So I think I'm sort of reaching the end of this. Do I like dark background? Maybe a little bit better. Let me blend it into the hair a little bit more. So it can all be part of the background. So there we go. I think I'm going to mute myself for another moment and quickly try this. You can see how wet it is. Let me quickly try it and then see where we are at. Maybe a little bit more color pens. Actually, I'm going to add a slightly more darker color here. So just for that edge. That shadow is really the darkest part that really sort of caught my attention of this drawing. Yeah, I quite like it. There we go. I love painting people, or drawing people. I've always done so. I used to think people drawing portraits was really intimidating. But now, over the years, I've sort of got used to it. And there we go. Let's dry this. I also think this eye needs to be a little bit darker still. Shall I make it dark in paint? I know I keep changing my mind. Shall we zoom in a little bit? There we go. You see all my little pencil strokes now. So this side of the eye is definitely a bit darker. So I need to concentrate for a moment. I do the same here. There we go. So let's try this. I know I keep saying it, but I'm going to really do that. So I think I'm on mute now. There we go. Quickly dried everything. I'm 90% happy with the drawing. I'm just trying to think if there's, maybe I need to put some highlights back in. I'm going to put my paint away for a moment. See if I want to add anything in pencil. And I have a black pencil here. There we go. It's very short. I've put it in a pencil extension thing. And see if I want to add any fine details in black. And then I think we're sort of almost finished. So especially sort of here details around the eyes. The black pencil is a very dark color. I don't want to go in too harsh. Here for the eyebrows, for example. Sometimes you just need a little bit of black. This is just the reality of things. Sometimes you need some dark colors. So, with the hair. Some little baby hair sort of floating around here. So some little wrinkles on the lips. There's often really fine texture on lips. So add some extra curl sort of vibe to the drawing. Maybe the outside of the eye a little bit more defined. See if I can add in a bit of eyelashes maybe. What do you reckon? Is that possible? So really focusing on the eyes for a moment. Eyes are important. So we want her to look not cross-eyed, and also we want that eye sort of to be like the intensity of the gaze, we want that to be right. So these sessions have all been a little bit different. I'm sort of still figuring out what the best format is of doing it. I've done some sort of sketchbook sessions where people can really easily join in, and I've done something like this, which is a bit more of an sort of demonstration. I don't know what you prefer. If you have a preference for one or the other, let me know. So I'm still finding the right format for this, and I want to do it in a way that's really fun and a little bit interactive if possible. That's the benefit of doing a live, that you can ask questions. I think that I'm going to say I'm finished. The colors are quite saturated and maybe a little bit more. So a few floating hairs here. So. There we go. I'm just going to add one little thing and then I'm going to say I'm really finished. So this is like a little trick that you can do if you have a drawing like this with either white gouache or quickly have a look, see if I can find it. So you can use white gouache or a little white sort of fine liner. This is a gel pen. Gouache is sometimes a little bit chunkier with a brush if you have a really fine brush. With a little bit of white you can add in a highlight again. So for example here in the eye. So I think that makes quite a big difference if we zoom in. So, and you can suddenly see the little highlight that I just added to the eye. It makes the eye come to life a bit more. And of course you can try and use the white of the paper for that. But it's much easier to add it back in afterwards. So there might be some other highlights that you want to add in. Sometimes there are some highlights in the hair that you want to add in or something. I think the ones in the eye are the most important. So, and if you have any lipstick or something, sometimes on the lip. There we go. So a little bit of white can make a world of difference. Should I add in a necklace? The neckline is a little bit different in the dress, isn't it? I think I'll leave it like this. I think I'm going to say I'm finished. So thank you so much for joining in. If you have any more questions, let me know. I really hope to see you again soon. Let me know if you painted along. If you share any of your artwork on social media, make sure you tag me because then I can see it. If you tag me as Makings and Musings, and I know, I can see it and I'll get a little notification. And I always love to know what people make. So thank you so much for joining in and I'll see you all soon at our next live session. Bye everyone.